Jhin and Zed are both on the same page of, yo, kill him. You kill him. He look at how many people he has killed. Let's just kill him and be done with it.
Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, episode 79. I'm your host, Ryan, here with your other host, Hetch.
And Hetch being here gets to do his favorite thing in the world, which is to start the hype train. It's been too long. It's been too long since we're getting some new crap, and that I get to hop on the hype train, rip my shirt off, and ribbon it around my head like a lunatic as I am just getting hype.
And as you guys can probably tell, Hetch is hype, which means that once again, we're taking a break from Yordles. Because it's reveal season and we have some new champions coming out that we have to talk about. In the grand scheme of things, don't worry, Yordle fans, we'll get back there. There's plenty of time. We'll be here forever, so we don't have any choice. Another thing we don't have any choice in the matter of is housekeeping. It's up top. That's just the way it is. You can listen to us everywhere. You can send an email if you want to podcastcore@gmail.com to get in contact with us. You can also get us on Twitter. It's also easy. Hop in the DMs, slide in, and then visit us at podcastcore.com for all of our info. And then follow us on any platform you prefer or all the platforms, because that helps with discoverability, helps us get the word out, and then leave, a like and a follow or a short review wherever you're listening. But the easiest way is to tell a friend to paint the canvas of their mind by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast.
What an artistic transition.
Mm-hmm.
What beautiful work you've done here. And I think it's only rivaled by the work of Jhin.
So we're talking about Jhin today. This episode is Zodiac, and that will become apparent as we talk more about him. Right now we're in reveal season for Legends of Runeterra, the card game. So we're starting to see the cards that are in this rotation of champs. And he was one of the first ones done. It was a very well done event as well. And I want to give a quick shout out to Runeterra CCG. Not that they sponsor us, we follow each other. They've always been great, but they always get the card comment or the card quotes way ahead of schedule, which is great for us because that's what we care about when it comes to the lore. So props to them.
Yeah, they save us a lot of time and headache as far as actually tracking down the info that we want. So we love you guys. Keep loving
Keep doing
us
the great
too.
work. Great articles too. Let's hop into it. So Zodiac, we're starting with the spell as we always do, and Gruesome Theater is the spell that's revealed here. So an actual good card for one. It's a 2-cost fast spell that has recall a unit with 3 or less health. Now the cool thing about this card, it's a good mana cost, it's fast speed, but it also can target both your creatures and theirs, and that's important. And it's a unit, right? So it can be a champion as well. This card is very flexible. This card will see play in obviously Jhin decks when we talk about him, and Yasuo decks because it's a cheap tempo spell.
Yeah, it's also going to be, I think, a nice tool to be adding into your Cannon and Akali decks as well.
Yes, good point.
But I like it because this is showing that Riot is really getting on board with how to balance the game, right? Like you already mentioned, the mana cost is really good, but it is balanced by the fact that it is that 3 or less health. So if you're trying to, get a nice mana swing, as far as using a 2-drop spell to bounce a bigger unit back to their hand, you're going to have to put some work in to actually lower that HP. So it's not going to be something that hoses a meta, but it'll be a usable card. So this is a really nice card to see coming forward.
Yeah, and then the part we care about the most is the quote, which is simple here. It says, "Artistry cannot be rushed," and that's from Jhin himself.
Oh, goodness gracious. You got to count to 4, baby.
Got to count to 4. So speaking of counting to 4, this takes us to our follower, which in the art, by the way, on Gruesome Theater, Jhin's art on the cards that have been revealed with him in this Ionia region have been great. Like, this is peak art as far as the cards are concerned. And it fits his theme very well. His stagehand is just as well. Great. So we have a 2-cost 4/4 ephemeral that has play, stun, and enemy. Now, yet another card that has potential to be really strong for decks that can establish, early pressure, but also decks that can win advantage on board quickly as well.
I mean, and this card is going to be like pretty much popping up in a lot of decks because it also has that flexibility of being a good blocker. Like it's a 2-drop you're not going to be upset about having in later in the game because we haven't said it yet, but this is getting our dumpy seal of approval. 2-mana 4/4, it's getting that dumpy seal on both cheeks.
On both cheeks.
But so a control deck's going to want this because it's a good way to really turn off an aggressive deck's attack. I like to play really bad decks, so I'm excited to throw this in my Hecarim deck.
Oh my god!
And see, keep trying to make Hecarim work.
Yeah, bring back old Hecarim.
Yeah.
So this is going to be the best quote we've had in a while, and Hetch mentioned counting to 4. So we have Act 4. A young priestess enters our story. Her tale is one of tragedy, conveyed on the pale lips of those she betrayed. Desperate to repent for her transgression, she carries in her arms a great burden, a gilded gift for the Noxians she welcomed to her land. We are left to wonder, was it sorrow or the bullet that broke her heart? Ever the poet.
Ever the poet. I think this quote is also really good because it's it really sets the theme of the card apart from Noxus, because this feels like a Noxus card on its surface. Play a big low mana thing that's going to kill itself, that can really boost a aggressive play. That if this said Noxus on it, I'd believe it. But
yeah,
how do you make it, an Ionian card? You specify that you're killing yourself to take out some Noxian villains. Oh yeah. Yeah, that nothing says Ionia more than that.
Yes, that's actually a great point. And a little foreshadowing to our next episode for some concepts from this card that Hetch mentioned. So go back over what he said, and we'll get back into why stagehand and this quote is important to me in all things Jhin. But let's talk about the man.
Yeah, and it's going to be important in this story too, because we're going to be talking about Jhin as far as, how a simple stagehand became one of the most prolific villains in all of Ionia. And it's an interesting tale because none of it starts off with Jhin. We start with the legend of the Golden Demon. So throughout almost all of Ionia, there is a constant legend or folk tale that goes around every little, from the smallest village to the largest cities, of the Golden Demon, which is a demon that comes into a town, kills without a sense of motive or a pattern, and leaves the corpses in a very strange state. Like all the corpses always they're staged in ways to depict a picture or a scene. There's always set to tell a story after they're killed. So it's kind of gruesome just from the little bit of the start off here, because I walk into a room and there's 2 dead bodies and they're doing some kind of lover's embrace or their last dance with the bullet holes expanded to and shaped to look like roses.
Yeah, it kind of, if you think about the comments, it's always said through history, some of the best art is tragedy or tragic, right? And Jhin takes that literally. And then that kind of leads into this concept of, this grotesque display of his own artistry and what's driving him to do this.
And like, especially at this point of the story, and a little bit of a foreshadowing later,
Mhm.
even a little past the story, we don't know why. Like, no one really knows why. And it's a lot like the serial killer history in the United States. Like, some of the most popular of those stories are ones that just never they go unsolved. Like, there's specifically like the Zodiac killer. Like, that's now just a legend and a myth, but it's something that actually happened, and that's weird. So with the Golden Demon, one of the issues is that since it is such a widespread thing and there are dead bodies turning up, despite the fact that you can go into a town and listen to a puppet show, like a medieval puppet show where they're telling kids to be good or the Golden Demon's going to get them, there's still, there are still mercenaries and local militia that are going out into the forests and all these stranded paths trying to track down the Golden Demon because, yeah, it's gone on for years and years, and it's a fun story to tell kids, but people are dying and we got to figure out why.
Yeah.
This goes on for kind of an unpointed amount of time. We don't know how long this actually lasts, but after going to a lot of spiritual advisors and going to the actual military, because this is at a point where they're like, Ionia doesn't have a military, but they're starting to build one up because of the Noxian threat. Like, they are trying to find all this information through every source and they can't, so they go to the biggest guns that all of Ionia has, and that is the Kinku Order. And the Kinku Order at this time is led by Master Kusho. For anyone out there who's listened to our Zed episode or a Shin episode, you might remember Kusho popping up there because Kusho is Shin's father. So a lot of this is going to tie into both of the origin stories for Shin and Zed, because a big part of the beginning of their story is that both of them changed after they hunted the Golden Demon. And ooh, if you want to know what happens after they hunt the Golden Demon, you can check those episodes out because we don't want to, go too far into those details of the breakup between those two. Favorite ship. but they but now we're actually going to talk about the hunt that kind of started the origin stories off for both of them. So Kusho takes on his two apprentices, who are Shin and Zed, and they start hunting the Golden Demon. Now, for anyone who hasn't listened to those episodes before, the Kinku Order, yes, it's an order of ninjas, but one of the reasons that Shin, if you've played League of Legends, is the worst ninja ever because he's a tank, is because the Kinku Order is kind of more like, for the Marvel comparison, a Doctor Strange character. They deal with the spiritual world. Like,
Yes.
everything that the Kinku Order does is to make sure that the spirit world and the physical world are in balance with each other and that neither one of them take over the other. So if it's not a spiritual thing, the Kinku Order doesn't care. Right? And that's the Kinku Order kind of in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So Zed, Shin, and Kusho, they do go hunting the Golden Demon, and this hunt lasts for like 4 years, because one of the reasons that they're getting pulled in here is no one has been able to track down anything about the Golden Demon. This is one of the reasons everyone thinks it's an actual demon at this point.
Yeah.
And so for 4 years, they go from town to town, city to city, looking at the grisliest of murders that are then shaped up to look like pieces of art,
Yeah.
and every time coming up with nothing. So it takes it begins to drain on the spirit of each member of this party. We actually get like a little quote here of like Kusho was famous for having a red mane, so he was famous for like a long red hair. And at the end of this 4 years, it has turned to snow white. Like, all the color in his hair is disappeared, and the that level of stress is applied to Shin and Zed as well. They come out a little, physically better just because they're teenagers at this point of the story.
Yeah.
But they see some massive crap. Like
It's a great setup for a story because, like Hench mentioned, this wasn't the intent of the Order. There are two things that are happening. And even if you listen to like our Aurelia episode, like listen to the Ionian episodes for sure, because you have a situation where a region that is focused on peace is forced into a place of defense and then soon more offensive type things that they're not used to. And what happens is the people that are best suited for the job, unfortunately, get pushed into those roles, right? So the king who being pushed forward to have to do this is already a stressful situation on history, right? On their history, on their way of doing things. So then on top of that, to be dealing with something so great that's local is just icing on the cake, right?
Yeah, and it's like even compounded by the fact that the more that they are thrusted into this position, the more that it puts a strain on what their position is, because the Kiku Order doesn't care about the physical world. Like they're not here to police the physical world. They're here to maintain its balance with the spiritual world. So with this investigation, they're constantly seeing death over and over again, and they're unable to do anything to prevent these deaths from happening. And that's kind of what leads to the separation of Zed and Shin as far as like breaking up the Kinku Order. A little spoiler there, but this happens because Zed is like, yo, what's the point of dealing with the spiritual world if we leave this world to die? Like, what's the point of maintaining this balance if there's nothing left here to balance? And these stresses end up kind of hitting a head when, after these years of investigations, they get enough evidence to support that this is a serial killer. It's not a demon. It's not a spiritual being that's going out and killing these people. It is either a human or Vastaya, which we haven't covered too much of Vastaya, other than like talking about Ari with those spoiler cards, but we haven't really like touched on Ari too much. So the Vastaya are like the humanoid animal creatures. So, but once it's confirmed that it's a physical being doing this stuff, Kusho wants out. Like 4 years of your life dedicated to hunting this one guy, and you find out it is a guy you're hunting.
Yeah.
And Kusho is immediately like, bet, we're done. Case closed. It no longer has any concern with us.
Literally not their jurisdiction.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, it does make sense because it is like, this is how the Kinku Order operates, but the fact that he so readily says hunt over,
yeah,
just after having seen countless numbers of dead bodies, and that like the moment you give up on it, you're just letting this guy keep doing it.
Yeah.
And like it's wild. It's kind of really sets in to stone how the Kinku Order was built and how it was meant to operate. And Shin and Zed are the only reason that this hunt continues, because they both push Kusho into continuing the investigation to track this guy down, because it's like, yeah, well, there's still a killer out there. We have to do something. And once they now know that they're hunting a person, they go back to their clues, they piece everything together, and they're able to kind of put a loose timeline of these killings next to a traveling theater. And this traveling theater is owned by a Zhu Yun. I have no idea if we're saying it right, but this show, it's officially Zhu Yun. We're right, you're wrong now. And so once they're able to kind of put these pieces, clues together, they go to the next town that this traveling theater group is supposed to be at, and Kusho disguises himself as a very famous calligrapher, and they wait, and sure enough, the next target that the Golden Demon settles on is this very well-known calligrapher, and he goes to kill him, but it turns out to be Kusho, backed up by Zed and Jhin. And this is the first time that we actually get a name for the Golden Demon, and it is a stagehand, a stagehand from this Zuyun traveling group under the name Kada Jhin.
Yeah. And the importance here is now looking at other media that deals with like serial killers. What tends to happen in a lot of these cases, from like if you look like the early 70s and stuff like that, is they will catch the right guy early on and they'll do investigations, they'll hold them for a bit or whatever. And then something happens where like there's not enough to keep them, or they end up getting out early for those charges and they go back to doing what they were doing, but now they're more alert to that somebody's on their trail. Because up to this point, Jhin is just doing his art, right? But now there's cops on his trail, and we'll see what happens next.
Yep. And as far as with this, what ends up happening is kind of more of like a dispute between our ninjas that end up tracking down Jhin than the actual fight. I'd like to imagine that there's like some crazy fight, because like, I mean, we're talking about 3 ninjas and then this madman with a single shot pistol that has just been going around like that. You know, it would be fun. You know, I want to see this animated. It'd be sick. But what we get as far as the story is that once they track down Jhin, they end up arguing over what to do with Jhin, because Jhin and Zed are both on the same page of, yo, kill him. You kill him. He look at how many people he has killed. Let's just kill him and be done with it. Which Jhin on board with it because the punishment fits the crime. Zed doesn't even bat an eye. It's like, oh, that's him. Zed just dives in and goes for the kill. He hits that R key and he is ready to dump every ability into this guy. And the only reason that Jhin survives is because Kusho stops Zed from killing him. And Kusho's like, no, we don't kill. Like, we don't kill humans. I don't care what he did. This is not what the order is about. We're like, the fact that we're even hunting this guy is against what we do. So I'm not going to break any more rules.
And this is the importance of the overall Jhin story. It's not about a villain that ultimately ends in a Sakuga battle. It's about the mental strain and the pulling in different directions of the order that is the story here, and what that does to this group of people specifically.
I mean, it is like specifically this group of people, but it's also a great foreshadowing on Ionia as a whole, because at this point, we're just at like the most heated tensions that exist for the Noxian Empire and the rest of Runeterra. And this is kind of a foreshadowing of what all of Ionia has to go through, which is, do we give up our traditions and what we believe in as spiritual beings to defend our homeland? Or do we hang on to these traditions and whatever happens to the physical world happens? And Kusho is very much an example of someone who is holding on to tradition at all costs. Because we've already broken enough rules, so we're not killing him. We're going to put him in prison. Ionia doesn't even have a prison. All right. So where he ends up taking Jhin is to the Tula Monastery, which is now called the Tula Monastery Prison. They just kind of say, well, it's a prison now. But Jhin is not really
a prisoner.
Jhin is not really like locked up in solitary confinement or anything. He is kept on the grounds of this monastery, and we don't know exactly how they're able to keep him there, but he is imprisoned in a physical sense in a very wide space. But otherwise, he's kind of free to do what he wants on the monastery.
Yeah, and one quick side note, because this is a callback to, if you're a longtime listener, we talked about Demacia, we talked about Jarvan, Garen, but mainly we referenced a bit Xin Zhao and why he's such an important character. And we'll get there in due time with him because being Ionian himself and taking what he's experienced and learned, coming to Demacia to bestow that on these younger guys who are going to lead Demacia, he understands this struggle, right? This pulling of defense versus offense, this pulling of spiritual versus physical, and what that means. So to everything Hetch just mentioned, Jhin Zhao's a great embodiment of that as well, and we'll get there. I just wanted to put that on the radar.
Can't wait. I can't wait to get to Jhin Zhao. Like, he is such a cool character. But as far as for Jhin, one of the nice things about the being imprisoned at this monastery is that we do get a bit of insight into Jhin, because the spoiler here is there is no insight into Jhin because he keeps to himself. So even though he's living with these monks for a few years and he's basically free within the monastery, he's just trapped at the monastery. But he's able to show or like to practice anything that he wants while being unarmed. So he shows a very natural and beautiful gifts in a lot of artistic practices. Noted here is smithing, poetry, and dance, but he doesn't say anything about himself. No one knows anything about him. He reveals nothing about himself.
Think of him as Hannibal Lecter to a point, where Hannibal Lecter in the stories, yes, he's in a prison, but he has freedoms to continue studying. He has access to anything he needs because he's such a unique being that they need him, right? In Silence of the Lambs and all that stuff. So that's probably a great one-to-one comparison if you want to look at serial killers through the history.
I think that's perfect because it's like when he's not killing people, both Lecter and Jhin are very amicable people.
Yep.
Like, and they're both able to, to mingle with high society in a imperfect fashion. And you would never know it until it's too late. So that's perfect. So, and this is where the story kind of like gets even more vague, which is perfect for Jhin as a character because we know so little about him, is that his imprisonment lasts until the Noxian invasion comes. So Noxus invades, and if you've listened to our Karma, Irelia, like any other of our Ionian episodes, the Noxus invasion is what really puts Ionia into the nation that we know it is today. All right. And the only thing I'll harp on as far as this invasion is that once they repelled their invaders, Ionia ended up having a power struggle because they had to use physical violence to protect their homeland, which is something that Ionia as a whole did not really agree with. Like we are a peaceful nation and we're a spiritual nation first. So now that they've experienced physical violence to really get Ionia to be Ionia, they now had this power vacuum of, well, now here are all of our new warlords, and now they know a way to expand their territories, which is physical violence. So Ionia ends up going through a lot of these civil wars, and it's during this time that Jhin is set free. We don't know how. We don't know why. So for the sake of the story, the biggest and greatest speculation that we have is that one of these warlords paid to get Jhin out of prison and was intending to use Jhin as a weapon in this game of conquering Ionia. And the issue there is that he paid for Jhin. Jhin doesn't care about any of this crap either. Like, what we know about Jhin is that he's very artistic. He only cares for art. So Jhin is set free, and when he is next sighted, he's using the weapons from the Kashuri armories. So the best way to explain the Kashuri armory is kind of a call out to a lot of like Far Eastern or Eastern Asian smiths that gained renown for weapons of high quality. I think like the easiest one that people would recognize is the name Hanzo Hattori. Hanzo Hattori is an actual historical figure, and he was just well known for making good swords.
Yeah.
which is impressive because Japan doesn't have ore, so their swords were always made out of the crappiest metals.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like that. So when he's using one of the guns, it's like when an anime is like, guy pulls out a sword, it's a Hattori, it's a Hanzo Hattori blade. Like Jhin pulls out his gun, and Ionians gasp, and they're, it's a Kashuri gun.
Yeah.
Like, so it's kind of like that. But the Kashuri, like diving into that is a story for another time.
Yep.
But now that Jhin is out, he's kind of now got this like backed up, this pinted up urge to really paint a canvas.
Yeah.
It's like, I have all of this art and I have a vision, and I finally now have the chance to show it to everyone. So what will used to be these single or maybe two killings in a town now turned into like these kind of terrifying bloodbaths. There's even a tale of the new Yanlei order, which is the ninja order that Zed creates after the fallout with him and Shin. He mounts a direct assault against Zed's ninja faction. Like Jhin is now just on a rampage, and he has all of the best weapons that Ionia has to offer, and seamlessly an endless bankroll. Like he could go wherever he wants, because then like now they're seeing all these like artistic like massacres, multiple bodies at each of one of these massacres put into these artistic displays, but now they're going off of the islands of Ionia. So now they're seeing killings like that in the main continent, like in Piltover and Zon. And so now the rest of the world is going, what is happening? Who is this guy? Like, is it a demon? Is it like some kind of supernatural force? Is it the void? What is happening? Why are all these people ending up dead? And that's where Jin's story leaves off, is him going on a killing spree.
It's one of those moments where it's a great thing. It's a great story, but it's one of those moments where the story begins at the end, right? Where you have to do a trilogy in this type of situation, because the story you're being told from beginning to end feels so natural, but the truth of what's being unleashed onto the world doesn't occur until the end. And there's more that has to be had. So Jin's story, like we've been waiting for a while to get here. And I just want to preface, definitely get ready for the next episode where we go even deeper. But continue,
because there's going to be, like, there are stories out there that really continue past his biography, so that we get to hear more about Jhin and his art after he escapes from the Tulip prison. And we're very excited to get into that, but we're also very excited because Jhin is showing up in Runeterra, which means we get some new cards. And with the way that this works, this is actually like my only complaint about the Jhin reveal, is that since they were showing Jhin off in the path of path of champions, like it was hard for me to fully understand how his cards work, because a lot of the interactions they had were also the new stuff they were adding into the 2.0 patch for Path. So that's my only complaint. Otherwise, it was so much fun to watch the stream and the videos following after it, try to figure out all these cards. So if I get something wrong to date this episode, the card's not out yet. And that's my last chance to defend myself here. So what we've got as far as Jhin as a card is he's a 4-mana 4/4, and the Mad Lads at Riot actually did it. That's the end of text on the front of the card. There it is. He's just a 4/4. Look at that. No keywords. Riot did it. They learned from like Udyr and stuff, is like, we could still have a champion, get keywords later without always giving it quick attack. So this Jhin, as far as on the play here, instead of saying play, it says origin, and the origin is the virtuoso. Yeah. So this is an effect that is unique to Jhin that comes out, and the virtuoso has a ton of text on it. So when the virtuoso is triggered, if a Jhin started in your deck, for every 3 fast spells slow spells, or skills you play while you behold Jhin, play a Lotus Trap. Right? And you may put any follower that has a skill into your deck during deck building. So this is really weird. It's kind of like a nerf to Howling Abyss as far as the way this card is worded, and I find it really interesting that they took the time to make sure that like you had to build a Jhin deck to get this virtuoso thing.
Yeah.
Um, but the wording on it is kind of weird, but you basically get a Lotus Trap every time you trigger a fast spell, slow spell, or a skill. So you trigger 3 of them, and on the 4th one, you get the Lotus Trap. So, Jhin always counts to 4. And the Lotus Trap is a skill that deals 1 to the enemy nexus. If Jhin is in play, stun the weakest enemy. So just off the Lotus Trap, there's a stun card in Ionia. Everyone's going to think Yasuo from here. And the card Jhin itself actually has an attack trigger, and the attack trigger is to deal 2 damage to all stunned enemies. Yasuo support. Let's go. So that's already a lot of fun right there, but we get to the level up, and to level Jhin up, you have played 12 plus fast spells, slow spells, or skills. So you're going to have to build heavily to get Jhin to flip. I think that's going to be really hard to do, but I think just all of the different stun effects he's creating, he's going to be more of a backline champion anyways. But the flipped version is a first for Runeterra. So when he flips, he's a 4 mana 4/4 with quick attack. He does not get +1/+1. He does not get +1/+1.
It's not his art.
It's not his art. He was always this flashy.
Yep.
But he does get quick attack, so it is easier to attack with him at this point. And the only thing that changes after the quick attack here is that instead of dealing 2 damage to all stunned enemies, he now deals 4 damage to all stunned enemies and the enemy nexus. So you get that extra damage to face. So, I mean, if you flip Jhin, the opponent's on a clock, good for you. But I think he's definitely going to be more of a back, kind of sitting on the back lines and supporting Yasuo. But this, it looks wild. Like, this crap looks so fun.
Dude, when it comes to flair, once again, we understand now why they waited to do Jhin to this point. Because it's going to change the game. It's going to introduce new deck building styles. They're introducing new keywords and new behaviors on top of having him still have his flavor, right? Like the 4 for 4/4 all the time. Like that's the way the Lotus Traps work. This is at the top of our list of peak representation of a character from League of Legends to Legends of Runeterra.
Yeah, and as far as like outside of the lore and looking at it just from the Runeterra perspective, it does make me excited to see what future champions come in because of the virtuoso deck building rule. He gets to ignore a lot of the region limitations to deck building, because if it has a skill on it, he can grab units from whatever region.
Yep.
So that to me is really exciting because it's showing that they're experimenting with these region combinations and how to get around these region combinations. And we were talking in this episode about Xin Zhao. Xin Zhao is Ionia Demacia. Like, he's very much in both regions. So the more that they play with this fluidity of how these regions interact in the card game, the more likely we are to see like a cool representation of characters like Xin Zhao in the future.
And we originally, if you go back and listen to our older episodes as well, longtime listeners will know we were hoping this would happen when Riven came out.
Yep.
And if you haven't listened to the Riven episode, listen to it and you'll know why. But
we were so wrong.
But it seems like they just weren't ready because this kind of fits what we thought with her as well. So we're happy to see it. I mean, as fans of both League of Legends and Legends of Runeterra, we're happy to see the changes coming to Legend of Runeterra to give it a new boost of life. I mean, it's still healthy. So yeah, I think, that kind of brings us to the end here where we're going to have more Jhin to talk about. Mm-hmm. But for now, as always, thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with the next Jhin episode.
Yeah, look forward to it. All right, take care, everybody.